are kids organized around their interests and capabilities? Nope, they're organized around birth year and zip codes. And why? Simply because it's more efficient to do that.
Welcome back to Educator University. As teachers, we know every student learns differently, but public education sometimes feels like a one-size-fits-all. Today's guest, Matt Bowman, is a former teacher and founder of OpenEd, a personalized learning platform with over 100,000 students. He's also the author of Open Education, a book that empowers parents and educators to think outside the box when it comes to teaching. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Annie. Great to be here today.
Yeah, great to have you. You spent decades working in education and personalized learning. From your perspective, why do you think public education still struggles to give personalized learning to students?
So yes, I have been in the classroom. I've worked with public ed for many decades now, and it's a great question of we believe so much in personalized learning. Why isn't it everywhere? And let me first say that many teachers do implement personalized learning. So there are the innovators around the world, around the country that have said, you know what, I do want to create some layers of personalization in my classroom, and they do it. So kudos to them. The question's really more of why not at scale? Why is, broadly speaking, public ed still one size fits all? And, it's very complex answers to that question, but really it comes down to there are a lot of teachers that don't want to do it, that are much more comfortable with just delivering their standard curriculum and letting that be good enough and feeling like that is good enough. And having gone through years of experience or their college training programs or professional development or whatever, there's lots of, people saying you should or shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. Every teacher has heard every version of every philosophy, right? So it really just comes down to, does the teacher believe in it and want to offer personalized education to students? So that's one driver, is teacher interest, because they have a lot of autonomy. Believe it or not, teachers do have a lot of autonomy in their classroom to do things how they want to do it. And yes, it's in a macro system of regulations and all that stuff, but there's a lot of flexibility that's already built in. So one is just teachers having the mindset to choose it. So that's where I'd start, is if you want to do it, do it. You can do it if you want to. Don't wait for the whole system to change, because that's not going to happen. The second thing is there's probably a lack of official demand from parents to demand personalized education from their side. So that's kind of why I wrote the book Open Education, trying to unlock all of our mindsets to say, let's think bigger about open ed and what does it mean to have personalized education for my child. And if you're choosing a public ed system, that's great. I think this is one of the only books that doesn't criticize the public ed system, doesn't say ignore it, abandon it, embrace it. If that works for you and your family, do it. But now think one more layer up of a mindset of demanding that your child get some personalized education options, and working together with teachers. Parents and teachers can pull that off if they want to.
And that was something in your book you really kind of clarified, is that you could maybe, as a parent or even as an educator, kind of create a program that's unique to your student or to your child. And that's something that you really, like you said, there's no limits to what that looks like. It could include public education, it could not. So kind of giving that flexibility.
Yeah, we say tap into every resource available. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one box of public school or district or charter or private or homeschool or micro school. Don't pigeon yourself a hole into one type. Tap into all of them. Find what works for your child and find all the resources that will help him or her succeed.
I teach foods class right now, and I have had a student who only comes for part of the day. And that was kind of unusual. Before reading your book, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, what's this? I was happy to have the student, but I'm also just like, that's interesting. I don't understand that. And now I look back on it and I'm like, oh, maybe they were doing your method
They
of
were doing open
recommending food.
education, Annie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's more prevalent than people think, of where, especially since COVID, families have realized they can tap into and tap out of resources that they have in their community. And public school is a great resource. If that works well for your family, tap into it for as much or as little as your family needs.
And as teachers, I think we can open up our minds. I know a lot of us are that way. However a student comes to you, if they're there for part of the day or the whole day, maybe it's going to look in the future. Maybe our schools will look a little different. And that's okay for us because we just want to teach kids. We don't really care how and when they come, but it might open up the way we see teaching.
It's so true, Annie. And in fact, part of what I mentioned in the book and probably could have spent more time on is recognizing teachers got into the profession to teach and inspire children. You express that's what you want, that's what you're passionate about. But we beat that love of passion out of teachers by making them just be test preppers. And it's just not what teachers went into the profession to do. And so we're handcuffing them from being what they want to become is inspiring light bulb creators for young people. And we've kind of taken that away from the teaching profession. And so I love what you said is we just want teachers to do what they do and inspire kids and figure out how to learn.
Yes, I think a lot of teachers are out there thinking that same thing, and yet we sometimes feel stifled by accountability things like testing and standards. And you mentioned in your book kind of how interesting that is that we've had this system put on us, and you talk about how that happened and how it's kind of not normal in other parts of society. Could you talk a little bit about what you talked about in your book there?
Yes, it really isn't very normal when you think about how we structure and looking back to Horace Mann that started this model, it was not intended to inspire kids to learn and pursue their life's purpose, passion, and mission. It was to do the opposite. It was to create a very obedient army of people that just follow the rules and follow a bell schedule. Like that's what they wanted. They wanted an output into the factory line workers and soldiers. And so the system was set up for that. And right now it's still trying to do that, believe it or not, right? And create obedient workers or obedient citizens that don't question or don't try to think for themselves, just follow schedule, follow, chase credits, ring the bell, move on. Even if you're not, even if you're not done learning about foods, if that bell rings, you're gone. You have to go to math, right? Because the system says we don't care about what you want to do. You must follow this system. And so it's really interesting how that doesn't, and then you add even more so, like, should schools, are kids organized around their interests and capabilities? Nope. They're organized around birth year and zip codes. That's it. And why? Simply because it's more efficient to do that. It's not any child development research contradicts that. Like, we haven't embraced any of that. We just say it's more convenient to sort kids by zip code and birth year than it is to sort them by interests, talents, passions, and goals of their life, right? So, yeah, that just doesn't make sense. And then you think about even testing kids at the third grade in 4 months. Every kid is so different. How can you even pick, at 8 years old and 4 months, an average kid should be at X. And then in our book, we point out what is average? What does that actually mean? And when you peel that back, you realize nobody's average. And in fact, girls are known to be 18 months ahead of boys, on their maturation cycle until they're like 15. And so if a third grader is a girl or a third grader is a boy, they might have a couple years worth of maturity differences already baked in. And we're holding both to the same exact standard, thinking that's equitable or fair. Like, that just doesn't even make sense. So there's all these illogical pieces that are part of the public ed system that have come from 200 years worth of tradition that more and more families and teachers are starting to say, that just doesn't make common sense.
I think also you mentioned about standardized testing, how they're made and how like the average idea is such a created idea based on tested people creating tests. And it's like we're living our life based off of these test makers who created a test to create the average. And it's kind of crazy when you actually think about it. You're like, what is going on?
It really is. And not to get on a political side, but it's sad. Both political parties or viewpoints seem to celebrate, if you really dig down into it, bad test scores because it justifies both of their arguments of more funding or more privatization. So there's like this crazy inherent goal to have bad test scores. And it just makes it kind of seem so ridiculous that I just tell teachers drop that stress. And in fact, and part of what I know that you've done your work with is you can map standardized testing to the average price of a house in that zip code, right? Standardized testing is measuring what is happening outside of the classroom more than it is measuring what's happening inside the classroom. And when I realized that 20 years ago, I was like, you know what? What we should focus on is building enrichment activities for all kids out and beyond into the community. That's where learning sticks. That's where learning becomes meaningful and lasting. You can't just do it in 180 days, 1 hour a day. Like that's not going to happen in one particular subject. So you have to think holistically about the child, that learning happens in the community at night, on weekends, during the summer. What is it that they're doing then that can help add to their success in life versus just trying to take a teacher that takes on the burden of trying to be the test prepper for one child for 180 hours a year? You can't do it. So you have to partner with parents. You have to partner with the community. You have to build and recognize that learning happens everywhere. And the more we can enhance and enrich those things, the better off for kids.
And I think our dream as teachers is that learning not only happens, in childhood, but also hopefully we create lifelong learners because that would be the dream, right? To have people be independent for themselves, which is what you've leaned into, especially talking about, you mentioned kind of leaning into students' interests. How do you kind of incorporate that with your style of learning?
I think it's got to start with interests. We how crazy is it to think that you can force someone to learn something that they have no interest in?
That's the challenge sometimes for us, right, as teachers.
Yes. And so just on face value, yes, maybe you can get them to pass a test on something in a 2-week cram, but research says after a month, they've lost it anyway. So if you haven't tied a learning to their interest, it's going to be very short-sighted in that cycle. So yes, you can pat yourself on the back that they passed a test about whatever on after a 2-week sprint. But if they weren't interested in it, it's not going to stick. So it was your teaching purpose accomplished? Probably not, right? And so you want to develop this way to help children and adults figure out what it is that they're interested in and what learning do I need to gain to achieve more of what I'm interested in. And that can cycle for a day or a week or a month or a year or 5 years. Like that learning cycle of interest is okay if it's a day's worth and a kid says, "Oh, I'm no longer interested in dinosaurs. I was yesterday." But maybe they're interested in dinosaurs for a year. So just keep feeding that interest as long as you can, and that's when true learning sticks, is once they can tie the resource and the learning to something they're interested in. And then I like to add one more layer, something that addresses a need. That's how you really connect long lasting learning, is you tie it to an interest, but then even more so tie it to a need in either the student's life, family, neighborhood, community. Maybe not even go to the state level yet, that they've solved some problem or working on something that addresses a need in their community. That's when learning lasts. And you can connect the dots from, why am I learning this? Because it's something I'm interested in. And you know what? I'm also helping somebody with a need that they have.
Yeah, I think it takes to the next level, and it also builds probably some entrepreneurial ideas into students that would give them opportunities for the future as well.
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. So I'm glad you brought that up. Is that young entrepreneurship to me is one of the greatest manifestations of interdisciplinary curriculum you've ever seen, where you realize that you have to tap into things that you don't know. And entrepreneurship then has this kind of self-motivated model, whether it's for profit or nonprofit. If you're doing a nonprofit entrepreneurship to raise money for a cause you care about, great. You're still learning the skills of entrepreneurship, which is, how do I provide a product or service that someone will pay money for? How do I make that customer happy? What have I done to solve their problem so their lives are happier because of it? So then you back up and say, oh, you know what? I need a website, or I need a flyer. I need someone to design a cool logo. I need to tap into someone that can write really well so I have clear messaging. Like all those skills and layers are what we want kids to gain. And I think entrepreneurship does that better than any other model out there.
Yeah, and I have a personal experience because I teach foods, but also there's a small part of the program that is catering. So they have to make
Nice.
food for other people. And I will say my own experience of seeing students get so excited to see their food being like given to other people for a purpose. And so, yeah, the
I
entrepreneur
love that,
spirit
Annie.
and that
Yeah.
help.
I mean,
Yeah.
foods class is a perfect launch pad for entrepreneurship. And even like here's an example for anyone who wants to start kind of a food business. So one model is to go bake cookies and then go try to sell them. Right? That's that one simple model. The other model is make up a menu of whatever you think you can make and go sell the menu around the neighborhood and have whoever wants to order cookies or cinnamon rolls or baked bread or whatever. So you sell the menu and then you go build it and deliver it,
Yeah.
right? Then all of a sudden you have zero waste because you could make a batch of cookies and only sell 3 of them. But if you're selling the menu, you're selling 100% of the stuff you make.
Yeah, and what a great lesson to teach students that they can actually find the need and then meet the need. It's a bigger
Yeah.
picture for them that they could actually take with them to the future as they build maybe their own business one day.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing is I watched I can't remember some YouTube clip with a social scientist that said problem solving unlocks a different part of a human brain and and it changes that brain forever. And so I just love that around what you said was if you can help kids see that they can address a problem, meet a need, that actually unlocks something in the brain that they didn't know before and it changes them forever. They become problem solvers. And that's one of the greatest skills we can pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, and I personally feel very passionate about that, and that's why one of the first activities I do with my kids is that I have them get these little, spaghettis and marshmallows and build the tower as a team. It's like, I want you guys to problem solve together, and the first thing they do as a team is work together, and so, yeah, I agree. I think it's funny to see the room shift too because they start to not only problem solve for themselves, but also think critically with each other about who's doing what, and so, yeah, I love that idea of problem solving being such a critical part of our learning, so
Yeah, and that type of activity, and all the teachers who are listening will know this, you can see very quickly which kids say, I need more instructions. I can't do this. Like, what do you want me to do? Instead of the kids that just jump at it and say, let's try to experiment, crash and fail until we get it right. Right. There's just that you can immediately see which type of child you're working with. And that can then help inform you. Okay, that one needs a little more structure, a little more instructions, and maybe I need to work harder to help them become self-directed learners. Whereas the other one, you just feed with ideas and let them run, right? And so it helps kind of assess your classroom type by seeing if they are self-directed learners or not from the start.
yeah, seeing kind of what you can help to help them grow a little bit more in that direction to be more
Yeah.
independent potentially. Yeah. And you've mentioned too in your book how everyone is a little bit different. Even your own kids, you mentioned, had a different approach and a different experience with learning. Could you share a little bit more about how different each person is? Even if they're in the same family, they could be very different in terms of learning.
That's what my wife and I realized as we had 5 children and we lived in the same house as we raised all 5 kids. We had the same cadence and schedules and expectations and job charts on Saturdays and Sunday dinners and we had all the same kind of cultural structure in the household, and so we thought the 5 kids would pretty much be raised the same, and yet you realize very quickly every child is different. And so we started looking at each child and saying, wow, if they are so different from each other right now, I bet their education might need to be personalized too, right? We can't just expect that all 5 kids will succeed in the same environment. So that really led my wife and I to start thinking about every year we would say, hey, what's going to be the best thing for this child for their education choice? And again, tap into all the resources available: public, private, district, charter, online, virtual, hybrid, micro school, whatever, right? And so that's what we started doing with each child every year. And we would involve them. One of our chapters is give your child a voice in that decision. Now, again, granted, how old they are matters, but you'd be surprised how young they can have an opinion about what they like or don't like about the standardized district school that they're assigned to. If it's great for them, great, support it, love it. Don't judge yourself, right? But if they hate it, or if they say, I really wish it were da 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 da, listen, give them a voice in that conversation and help them decide for that semester what their plan is. Hold on to it for probably a semester. But again, if they're miserable after 2 weeks, probably change something, right? So allow yourself some what we say in the book is love, limits, and latitude. You need to kind of figure out the right balance of, you can't just give love, whatever you want, whatever you want, whatever you want. You got to have some limits and some structure, but we also need some latitude amongst those limits. So, and that's the hard part is getting, it gets messy. We want clear roadmaps for parenting, and it just doesn't exist. You have to just adapt on the fly, start with love, limits, and latitude, and figure out the right mix for you and your children, and give them a voice in that decision, and it'll make the school year go way better.
Yeah, I love those 3 L's because actually as teachers, we probably use very similar things in terms of classroom management and things. I'm kind of curious your opinion in terms of as a having being a parent and having your child have personalized learning is one piece that is really, really empowering. But what about as a teacher, if you're thinking in a classroom, I want to get more personalized learning, are there things that you would suggest to kind of start implementing in your classroom to give more of that for your students in their experience?
I would. Lots of ideas. I would say start small. Don't impose something upon your expectation that is too stressful. So first advice I'd give is to, if you want to implement personalized education in your classroom, start small, start with just something, and then build up from there, so you don't overwhelm yourself. And here's a couple examples of, maybe you carve out 2 weeks in a semester where you just say, this is going to be a learner driven sprint, where you're going to set aside the standardized rote curriculum or whatever expectations you think you have to fulfill because of the system. Just set that aside. And if you communicate openly with your principal and your parents, you're going to be fine. So just say, hey, we're going to do a 2 week sprint. Day one of hour one of that 2 week sprint is the kids are going to identify, brainstorm themselves or with friends. What is it that they're interested in? What are some of the things that they'd like to learn about? One of the sprints I did when I was a sixth grade teacher is and I again cleared it with principal and parents, whatever. It was like, what myth out there do you want to research and learn more about? And we gave them some limits: Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, Bermuda Triangle. At the time, it was where did the Titanic go? Because this was early, mid-90s, they hadn't discovered it yet. So kind of, crop circles, the Stonehenge. Like, what are some of these things these kids had heard about? Especially, I was living in Washington at a time where there was always Bigfoot sightings. And so Bigfoot was a big thing. And it was like, for 2 weeks, pick your topic, go deep on it, and in 2 weeks, share with the class what you've learned. And when you come to class, that's all you're doing. You're working on your sprint topic, looking up resources, reading books about it, drawing, making a board. Some would make board games about their topic, just, and they'd write rules and cards and questions. It was great. So do something like that, where you have a 2 week sprint where they can choose from a list of 10 or 20. And if you're not comfortable with that, choose 3, right? They can choose from these 3. So they have some autonomy for the next 2 weeks and just see what happens. Like, that's probably the best place to start, is just see what happens. And if it goes well, and my experience was it went really well, so I would just do more and more of those. Okay, the state needs us to study Canada or the history of Mexico or whatever the curricular topic was. Of all these topics in here, pick one and run with it for 2 weeks. And that's it. And then I was just there to support and help them kind of Q&A. I'd wander the classroom as they're working on their projects and maybe plant some questions that would help spur some more investigation. And it was great. And it can work.
Yeah, that's a really good, just practical tip. And it seems like that kind of, in a way, inspired your current business, which is
It
kind of
did.
similar style of learning. Teaching traditionally has been the person in the front directing things. And so moving that more to being on the side is a powerful thing to remind teachers they can do. They're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and one other thing that I caught myself or, at some point, if you took a stopwatch into your classroom and you measured the amount of time that you are talking versus kids talking, just become aware of that. Because at the end of the day, a lot of research says kids and learners learn what they say. They don't learn as much what they hear. And so if your stopwatch says you're 90% of the voice in the classroom, verse that. Try to get to a point where you're 10% lecture, your voice, and you're hearing kids discover things for 90% of it. Like just that switch from, again, the sage on the stage is 90% delivery, 10% participation. Reverse that. Try to go to a point where kids are talking 90% of the time during the day, sharing ideas, they're sharing things that they've learned, sharing insights that they've gained. Again, depending on age level and all that stuff, right? But I taught sixth grade. And if you can do it at sixth grade, you can do it everywhere above that for sure. And younger kids have opinions and have insights that they've learned. I mean, the funnest thing is show and tell at first grade. Some of those kids can go on for 20 minutes talking about something that they brought. Like there's no shortage of passion and knowledge and energy about their dog or their cat or their bird or their dinosaur dragon that they built. Like they can go on, just give them a chance to speak and reverse that 90-10 so that you let the classroom be inspired by sharing.
And I think they can learn from each other too, which is really powerful. We don't have to be the one talking. We can have the students learn from their peers, which is a powerful thing because as an adult, you kind of learn from peers as well, which is models that for the future.
Yeah, and I got to a point where it was a reward for someone. They got a certain level, they could be teacher for the day.
That's
And
fun.
it took time to get there, but if you create the structure of the classroom, that any kid can go up there and say, okay, now we're going to break into our sprint activities, and so they were just in charge of instruction of where we go, and if they needed to read something from a book or whatever, they could. But it was the idea that it was their opportunity. They were rewarded by being teacher for the day, and it was fun.
Yeah, and it creates leadership in them. They have that confidence now that they can lead a group of people. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting how much you brought from your experience teaching 6th grade and then moving into this new job and also creating really opportunities for parents and teachers or parents and students to find different ways to educate.
Through everything that, again, open education, the book and our program is my life's mission and work, right? So I'm 55 years old, and in that book is everything I've ever dreamed of and I've learned and experienced firsthand for 30 plus years being a parent and a teacher. And so we now have 4 grandkids with 2 on the way, so it's fun to see the next generation come around too.
Yeah. Are they gonna be using your approach, do you think, as well?
Yeah, the approach is tap into all the resources available. So
Yeah.
absolutely, that's what they're doing.
Look, tell your kids enjoyed it so much they wanna put it to the next generation. They're saying
Yes.
that. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah. I think one of the things I was gonna bring up, it's a little bit off topic, but I wanted to come back to it for a minute because I think teachers are listening and wanna know this. It can be frustrating, as a teacher, you're hearing all this and you're getting excited and you're thinking, "I agree, I agree, I agree." But, we're in the system and you're right, we can kinda take control of our own autonomy, but is there something that we can be doing do you have tips in terms of advocating on a more, like, macro level of pushing back a little bit and trying to get new programs established or ideas for teachers to start advocating for students for personal choice within their school systems?
Yeah, first step is to do it yourself. So make sure you're knowing how to navigate that within the confines of your classroom. So start there. There's a company value we have in open ed, which is I did is greater than you should. And it's a powerful principle if you ponder that one. So it's easy to spew you should do this, you should change that, you should make this, you should. If any teachers or public policy advocates are hearing themselves say you should too much, try to change that to say I did. This is what I did in the confines of what I could do. This is what I've done, and this is the results of that. So I like that concept. So start there is become an I did person instead of a you should person, and just do it. Just demonstrate it. Invariably, your principal or other teachers will say, well, what did you, how'd you get permission to do that? I just did it. And so then they're going to just do it. And then you're going to have a school wide version of a I did versus you should. And so then the district can say, hey, that school is doing some cool stuff. Parents will start saying that school's doing cool stuff. I want to switch over to that school. Like that's the type of momentum that you can achieve is by being a magnet of parents and students and other teachers want to be there because you're doing it instead of just spewing you shoulds.
That's a very powerful shift, actually, to hear as a teacher is that we do have so much power because we are the ones in the classroom with the students. And though we may feel at times these systems may feel in certain ways with that, but at the same time, it's like you said, I did instead of you should, and that will really bring the power back into teachers' hands. So that's a great reminder. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you want to go macro level, invite your local congressperson or legislator or district board member. After you've done it, then say, "Hey, you want to check out my classroom? We do some really fun stuff." And they're like, how'd you pull that off?" "I just did it." And look how happy the parents and students are, right? And so then you can start macro advocating at the school board level, at the state level, at the legislative level, right? If you want to, right? It's not a must because again, change happens by the individual and contribute that to your own classroom, to your own wing, to your own school, to your own district, neighborhood, whatever. You can really make changes just doing it that way.
Yes, yes. And I think personalization is there. I think we've got to recognize there is some level of personalization already existing because, for example, as you get higher up into the grades, they have options for electives, which something they don't have, in the primary grades. So, and then as you get higher into high school, the options become more varied and wide. So I think we already kind of have a system a little bit like that. So maybe tapping and leaning into that even more.
Yeah, and I've often said, if you look at a traditional bell curve, we've always done personalized education at the edges. We've always had special ed. We've always had IEPs and personalized education for those with disabilities, which is great, and we always keep needing doing that. We've also, over the years, in many places, have had some sort of gifted level where they're, at a or advanced level, you can take advanced level classes or whatever. Like we've had on the edges some personalized education. But in the middle, it's always just been standardized. And what I've seen over the past 5 years is that middle shrinking to more and more people wanting personalized education for their children, both at the struggling end and the board end, where they just want more. And so that standardized set of this works for everyone is getting smaller and smaller. And so personalized education by default then is really expanding at both sides of that bell curve. And it's really, again, back to the very, very first part of our conversations. Parents need to demand it, and teachers need to feel comfortable partnering with parents to deliver it. And bringing those two together, you can make something special happen.
And I think parents and teachers are more aligned than they realize in so many ways. And I think sometimes it almost feels like the school board and people in the places above are getting in the way. It's like, can we just come back to the basics? Because I think we have a very similar perspective in that. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
totally agree. And that's where just do it and then invite school board members to come visit your classroom. You'd be surprised how many don't ever get invited, right? Like if
yeah.
you're a teacher and you're doing cool things and you want to be a lighthouse on the hill, be bold enough to invite the chair of your district school board into your classroom. And then be so bold as invite a legislator over, right? And just say, here's what I'm doing. And teachers have more flexibility built into law than they believe or that they've been told. So know that you have that flexibility and then validate it by invite a legislator in and say, look what I'm doing. And I promise you, they're not going to say, oh, the law doesn't allow you to do that. And if they do, call me because I would love to have that conversation, right? Is that what legislator would go into a teacher who's invited them in there and say, here's the cool stuff I'm doing with kids and say, that's against the law. Wouldn't happen. But we scare ourselves into thinking that doing creative things in the classroom is going to, break the law or something.
I think teachers are hard on themselves too. They feel like it's
Yeah.
not perfect. And I think that's part of this idea of letting a little bit of control go because it's, and when you're the one on the front of the classroom, then you have a lot more control and then you're like letting that go to the students. And there's a little bit of maybe a learning curve for some teachers to accept that or understand that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And really, going back to a couple key principles is that teachers, you have more control over some of those things than you think. So if you want to change, you can. And also, I like to say, don't volunteer your time so much. And by that, I mean, you're you're paid for your time. You're a professional. Don't volunteer your time so much. If you feel like you need to spend hours and hours and hours at night or in the summers or on the weekends doing your job, something should change because you are donating that time to the government. And if you want to do that, fine, but don't feel like you have to. And just do your job in the hours that you're paid, just like any other professional does. When teachers donate their time incessantly, it takes away the professional status of them, in my opinion. So don't donate your time. Just do your job well in the time that you're paid for it. And then I like to say, with the free time that you've now spare, you now have, go start a little side gig. There's something about being a side freelance entrepreneur that helps teachers have some confidence in themselves to not feel like they're so dependent on that one job that they can't ever do anything innovative for absolute fear of being fired, which is hardly going to ever happen. But starting a little side gig gives you some confidence, gives you some ability to think differently. It gives you a little break from the pressure of teaching that it is to turn on that switch every day. And you're done at 3. You have weekends and lots of holidays and summer break, lots of times to do a side gig, and don't go into that begrudgingly like I have to. Do it as an opportunity to balance out your mind, and you'd be shocked at how liberating it creates your mindset in the classroom.
What a great message. And I'm just ticking off boxes in my head because I actually just did a whole video on my channel about finding boundaries and figuring out how to
Good.
communicate those boundaries. And then I've also personally just been talking to people about this idea of creating a life outside of school so that you have kind of a balanced life and creating a professional atmosphere in school. Like you said, we all need to kind of step back and be like, this is a profession and we need to be professional. So yeah, thank you for sharing that because that's definitely in line to everything I've been talking about on the channel.
Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, with guests and myself and teachers hearing teachers talk about this, it's very, very relevant information. So yeah, and
Good.
I think you being a teacher really brings a different perspective on this because you've done it. You literally had built a business on the side, it sounds like. Is
Yeah.
that kind of how it happened? It happened on the
Yeah.
side of your actual teaching job?
Yes. At one point, I had 7 jobs when I was a teacher. Because my wife and she chose to stay home with the kids, so we had 5 kids. We were trying to do it on the single income, and realized we needed to maximize hours outside of school to generate more income for our family. And she then would work after school sometimes, as an accountant, a bookkeeper for local companies, from 3 to 6 after I got home, and I was with the kids. And so there's all kinds of benefits from having an entrepreneurial mindset as a teacher. And what you need to do, though, is only work when you're paid to work, and don't volunteer and donate your time to the government. That's not what you need to do.
Yeah. Well, if you can do it, I feel like anybody can. 5 kids is a lot. Imagining having 5 children and trying to build a bit. I can't even imagine it. So I feel like, if you can do it, you're listening, I feel like we can all do it. So it's kind of fun to hear that that's
Well, it is true.
possibility.
And my wife and I would spend, 10 p.m. to midnight. That's how we built our side business into where we were. So, you just have to do it. And I have 2 of my sons are public school, high school teachers.
Really?
So it's fun to see them, work when they're paid to work, and don't work when you're not paid to work, because you are a professional. And I've instilled, I said, if you're going to teaching, that's the one thing you need to tell me, is that you're going to work when you're paid to work. And then outside of that, you do other things of interest or entrepreneurial, and they do a combination of both. And it's a really healthy balance.
Yes, yes, and I think having something else to focus on really helps you to put teaching in perspective because it can consume your life because there's so many students and their needs, and
Yep.
I know personally, I guess emotionally, I just get so like, oh, I need to do all these things. But you're right. Like there's this great professionalism that needs to happen. And so, yeah, what a great reminder. Are there any final thoughts we haven't covered yet that you want to share with teachers about what you do and or message you have to share?
Yeah, one thing in the book that I really love that I have to share always is this concept of approach grading as mastered and not yet instead of A and fail, a letter grade or fail. Like that concept of mastered or not yet is a lifelong principle that I really love, which is reflective of all adults too. We haven't mastered everything. We're not yets in almost everything. So let's share that same vision with kids is they're not bad at math or they're not bad at reading or whatever. They just haven't got there yet. Like that three-letter word of yet is one of my favorite words is we're just not there yet. We haven't done that yet. We haven't learned how to do that yet. And if you can embrace that as a teacher, as a parent, as a community leader, as an entrepreneur, like, all those things. We all wish we could have, all these things were perfect. That's never going to be the case. So drop the pursuit of perfection and just realize those are just not yet. Work on them one at a time as you have time and convert your not yets to mastered eventually.
Yeah, I think in your book you mentioned sometimes it feels so final when you take a test and you didn't get the score, you got a C or an F or something, and you feel, okay, I'm never going to do this. But what that makes no sense. It's like you had a C
Makes
in that
no sense.
moment. Yeah, you maybe you didn't understand in that moment, but you could still like. There's just you're right. In school, we have this finality that really doesn't exist in real life. In real life, you just keep improving, you keep getting better, and there's no like mark like this is the moment. You have to do something. So
Yeah, and then we point out that in the book is, think about LeBron James or Simone Biles or all the best athletes. Even at the best, they're like 50% win rate or score rates or field goal, right? And so if 50% is the best of all time for athletes, give yourself some leeway to say, you know what, if I make half the questions on that, that's pretty good. I'm better than Steph Curry at shooting three. And so if you can live with that, embrace that concept of tests are not final. Those are just a demonstration of some not yet. And if you want, go back and figure out what you missed and convert those to mastered. That's where the learning occurs. It doesn't occur from getting your grade and I got a C. And you have no idea what you missed. You have no idea what you got right. No learning occurred there. So don't pretend it did. Learning occurs when you know what you did wrong and you want to fix it and you have an opportunity to show mastery again from your not yet before. So yeah, we can spend a whole lot of time on that. I
my
just love
gosh.
this concept of work on the not yet.
Yeah, and I think that grading in general, that's a whole topic we probably could just open a whole other podcast about because I think that's just opening thinking about how grading itself as teachers is such an interesting concept and really like, what is it and all that stuff. So maybe for another podcast, we'll have to hold on to that for another time.
Sounds good.
We have some kind of fun questions that I always ask for teachers to get to know you a little better. First question here is favorite teacher lunch?
Favorite teacher lunch? I love chicken sandwiches.
Easy. Your best behavior management tip for a classroom?
I'll just go with the one I shared, which was be an incentive to be a teacher for the day.
Love that one. That was a really good tip, actually. And it's free too. As teachers, we're always buying like little things. It's free. Teacher that made a difference in your life.
Mrs. Lewis. She is a fun story if you have a moment, which
Yeah.
is she was the district I was attending at the public school at the time, implemented a K-1-2 model where you stayed with the same teacher, kindergarten, first and second grade. And they had a third of it was kindergarten, the third, first grade, third, second grade, and they just, cycled through. And so the concept was that the first grade, they could do some mentoring and the teachers would have that relationship for 3 years with those young kids. And so I had one teacher for those first 3 years. Her name was Mrs. Lewis. And then I went away and forgot about her, whatever. Right. And then I became a teacher myself. And I had the opportunity to go student teach at my same public elementary school. And I was shocked to arrive there and talk about teacher. I went to the teacher lounge for lunch and there was Mrs. Lewis.
Wow.
She
Small
was
world.
in her last couple years before retirement, but she was still there. And I got to say, "You're my hero. You are so amazing." And so we had a really great reconnection then. But the story doesn't end there. 20 years later after that, she had been retired for 20 years. And I had then started, Open Ed, this personalized education program that works with micro schools and homeschools. And I got reconnected with her. She was teaching kids who were in a micro school participating in the Open Ed program.
Wow. She
Can
just
you believe that full
keeps
circle of
connecting.
like my favorite teacher on the planet taught me, was there when I was a student teacher, and then ended her career after she retired, was volunteering at a micro school teaching kids in an Open Ed model.
What a small world.
Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible experience. I love that story. Okay, last question here for a fun question is last lesson you taught.
Last lesson. I'll say that the last lesson was just Sunday to our children. Emailed out a summary of that. I did is greater than you should to all my adult children. They're all adult. They're all married. All 5 kids are married now. And so I reflected on that concept of I did is greater than you should, and passed that on to them, and hope that they adopt that into their lives, because I think it really is a powerful way to live, is do stuff instead of pointing at people and telling them they should do something.
Yeah, yeah, we talked about earlier, a really powerful message for us to think about as we move into teaching and life in general. So, well, thank you, Matt, for sharing all this information about open ed and your experience in personalized education. I know people listening are going to get so much value from what you've shared. If they want to reach out to you, where can teachers find you online?
I'd go to opened.co/book. That's where you'll find the book and links to our social media site. We have blogs, articles. You can find our open education podcasts. All those things are available, but opened.co/book is where you can launch into all those things.
And I will link it right below this video for people to click on so they can go ahead and get a direct link.
Awesome.
To it. So, well, thank you, Matt, for sharing. And I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments.
Thanks, Annie.